All right, so I just drove by gas stations, gas line. Everyone's waiting on getting gas. It boggles the flipping mind, man. Now, these same people are waiting on getting gas. I'm sure many of them are going to say, inflation is here. Inflation, oh my goodness, the government printing press is causing inflation. I say, now there won't be price inflation on gasoline. I mean, it could be a little bit, but Sniffy Joe's going to come in there and say, you can't have increases on price of gasoline during a chaos. You can't do that. We're going to make it illegal, which is just freaking idiotic, because all that does is make favored units be able to get favored or first come to get to the freaking the source of what they need, of the supply, in this case gasoline, in which they can do hoard, load up and then hoard and sell for a hefty profit in the black market. Basic economics 101, man. Jeez. Anyway, so my issue is, the government printing press is what causes inflation. All right. So what happens now? Let's say Sniffy Joe puts price controls on here. All right. I mean, I haven't heard he's going to do that yet, but it wouldn't surprise me at all, because liberals are idiotic. Unfortunately, Republicans are idiotic too, but liberals are even more so, because they think that literally by the stroke of a pen they can make things happen. It's stupid. So what happens now when Sniffy Joe puts on price controls? You want to guess what happens? What does that do to supply and production? It slows it down. You want to know why? Because there's less incentive to drill, less incentive to dig, less incentive to ship, less incentive to refine. All right, so why is the grid, all of a sudden I know, we've been talking about the grid being freaking suspect for decades. We had a congressional testimony back in 2005. Ted Koppel had written a book back in mid-2000s about the same thing. It's called Lights Out. Ted Koppel, not a far-right freaking prepper. We've been knowing this about years, and no one did a damn thing. To include Trump, to include Bush, to include Obama, to include Sniffy Joe. Because, by the way, I think Sniffy Joe was vice president. No one did anything. Because it's all fear-mongering. All right, so anyway, I want to talk about the inflation freaking idiots. I'm sick of this crap. Inflation caused by government printing, they'll tell us. It's such a freaking trite, lazy man's economics to say inflation is caused by government printing. You know why? Because what causes inflation? Well, it's scarcity. What causes scarcity? It's government freaking incompetence, i.e. not protecting the grid, which is having supply corruption. Supply is going down. When supply goes down and people get scared, what happens to demand? It jumps up. I was reading my man Glenn Reynolds over at Instapun, and he said, it's interesting. He went to the gun range. He went in the morning, and he drove by the gas stations. No one was in there. He comes back later on after lunch, and apparently some local talk radio guy said, don't panic. Gas will be available. The minute he says don't panic, of course, everyone panics, and now the gas supplies are freaking through the roof. Gas lines are through the roof. All right, so supply goes down. Supply goes down because of the grid being hacked, because we'll just say Hugo Chavez takes over the production of the oil refineries, the production of the research and development, and they're just incompetent boobs who are loyal to Chavez but don't know their head from a hole in the ground. What happens to supply? It drops to the ground. Does that have anything to do with freaking government printing press? No. And this is what ticks me off about the inflation bugs. It's just such a lazy way to scare people to buy gold or to buy Bitcoin or to make themselves sound good on YouTube. Like, government printing is inflationary. No, it's not, dude. It's not. It's just not. Can government printing be inflationary? Well, the reason is yes. The answer to that is because government printing is always follows behind the insanity of a Hugo Chavez and Robert Mugabe, who always say, we're going to create a good economy now in Argentina by putting all these regulations, all these freaking mandates on businesses, expropriation, as Chavez did, as Zimbabwe did, drive down supply, and then they're going to put price controls, and then they're going to print money like crazy, and then, of course, what everyone's going to do is they're going to blame printing money for the cause of inflation, when it wasn't. Is the driving down supply because the freaking government is just insane. This is no different than people say CO2 leads to global warming. It's freaking insane. Global warming, if anything, leads to CO2. But CO2 leading to global warming is simply not. It could be. It could be. And like government printing could be. But you can't sit there and literally can't say to me. Anyone can say what they want. To say CO2 inherently leads to global warming is insidious and it's just silly. Can it? Sure, at the end of the day. That's a byproduct of it, though. That's a byproduct. Inflation is a byproduct of government printing, or government printing would lead to inflation as a byproduct of the freaking insanity of bad governance to begin with, my friends. And this is what you got to stop listening to these fools say, oh my goodness, hoard gold, this because massive inflation is coming in. If they say massive inflation is coming in because of the printing press, they're freaking fools. I'm pissed by this. I'm sorry. You see it right now. If Sniffy Joe put a freaking price point on price control on natural gas, gasoline, guess what would happen? Immediately supply would fall off the cliff. Why? Because people aren't going to produce for a loss. They're not going to produce for a loss. No, they can do it for a little bit. They can do it for a little bit, but they're not going to produce for a loss. There's no incentive whatsoever for them. This is where the market, why prices are so needed, why socialism always fails, because there is no pricing mechanism. You have to know what kind of product or what your price will get on the freaking open market in order to determine if it's worth it for you to take the risk with your capital by doing R&D, by drilling a hole in the ground to see if there's that black gold in there. Oh my goodness, it just frustrates me so no end. People just don't get it. Oh, but Josh, if Sniffy Joe just puts if he just puts a price control in there, we'll pay less. That just is freaking idiotic. You'll pay less on, quote, the legal market. Good luck trying to find supply. It's no different than if they put a price control on the amount that Medicare reimburses. Yeah, you'll pay less if you can see a doctor who'll take that. There's no doctors who'll take that because they also know in an open price mechanism that their costs are higher than what the government reimbursement rates are. So yes, you have health insurance, but you have no health care. It's always the same thing. It's price controls, it's supply disruption because of insane government regulation. That's what causes inflation. What you're seeing now is stupid gas shortages are because of a grid meltdown, because we haven't protected the grid, and it's only going to get more to come. Think about this. We're just going to use pipelines, for instance. All right, very few pipelines go through the Northeast anymore. Cuomo doesn't let pipelines go through New York. I think there's one that goes through basically is barely through Long Island Sound to get to New England. That's it. So basically, when that pipeline is kaput, there's no natural gas going in from Pennsylvania through New England, none whatsoever. Now they get, I think in Quebec they have a natural gas pipeline, or at least they have a hydro that goes to Maine. But where's Massachusetts get fed its natural gas? I think it might be also Quebec. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's very few pipelines that go through into New England from these places. Very few. And as such, when you have a supply disruption as we're having now, there's only 2 refineries in the whole Northeast, is my understanding. That's it. So they're relying on importing natural gas and all this other fuel. They're relying on that and fossil fuels. But they hate fossil fuels up there. And so not only are they relying on it, but they're also going to put limits on how much fossil fuels can come in, and ultimately they're going to ban them outright. Well, they say they are. They're not going to. All right, so then the demand for fossil fuel, or then the supply is going to be way down. What is that going to do to the freaking prices? It's going to make them go through the roof. You're not going to get a replacement from wind and solar photovoltaic. You're not. It's silly. It's idiotic to say that. It's not going to happen. You're just not. And then you're going to put more demand on the load because you're going to make sure people have electric vehicles. How are you going to get that electricity generated? You're not going to get it from wind and solar. You're going to import it. We all know this. Everybody knows this. The only people who say otherwise are people either are lying or they're living in fairy tales in a cotton candy land, which is a lot of the left, I grant you. All right, we'll see you.